All right. Hi everyone and welcome to Questacon, the National Science and Technology Centre in Canberra. My name's Sarah and I'm here today coming to you from the Schmidt studio, which is one of our studio spaces that we have hidden behind some of the galleries in the Questacon Centre. So I'm here to talk to Simonetta Pippo, who is the Director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Now, it's really exciting to have you here today, Simonetta, because for Australians, and really, for the first time, a really relevant time to be talking about space with the announcement of the Australian Space Agency this week. And for young people as well, we suddenly have the opportunity to work in the space industry in our own country, which is incredibly exciting. Now, of course, it's not just a conversation with me. We have a live studio audience here today, and we're live streaming through Facebook on Questacon's Facebook page and also through Questacon's YouTube channel. So we're going to be getting questions from the audience here and from our audience across Australia. If you do have any questions, feel free to add your questions in the comments on the Facebook live stream, and we'll try to get to them in the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Now, before we continue, I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, elders past and present, on which we meet today in Canberra, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present and watching around the country. So, Simonetta, welcome.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So the Office for Outer Space Affairs, I'm sure a lot of people across Australia didn't know that the United Nations has an Office for Outer Space Affairs. What is it and why is it important?
Yeah, indeed, this is happening often, I have to say. The office is quite old. It was created at the beginning of the space era. What we do is to try to bring the benefits of space technologies and applications, mainly for the benefit of developing countries, but in general to everyone, I would say, to humankind. So, as I'm used to say, this is quite a broad mandate because bringing the benefits of space to humankind is quite an interesting top level, let's say, a strategic objective. And how we do that in several ways, but the main goal is and the main activity we have, we function as a sort of a platform for international cooperation. So we help everyone to get in touch with others, mainly from developing and emerging countries, trying at the same time to do a lot of activities in terms of capacity building, training courses, and trying to really train people all over the world on how important is space technologies, services, and applications for improving the quality of life on Earth.
Great, awesome. So I guess that kind of explains why the United Nations is interested in space too, to improve cooperativity on Earth as well. How does that tie into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, you just touched the main point. In reality, all the activity is in support of sustainable development, and is also in trying to solve or to help solving one of the big problems that we found, that we find every day, which is what we call the space divide. To make a parallelism, it could be the digital divide. It's exactly the same. Why? Because information technologies are in reality a very good tool across the board, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So if we make the parallelism, space technologies, space services, space applications, so the use of space-based data is really a tool across the board, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And so we started to talk about space divide and what to do with emerging and developing countries to help them getting more space in their own lives, and so in this way to become even, let's say, to have a better life in health, in agriculture, in urban development, climate change, disasters, whatever. You can mention, I mean, I can talk 24 hours about the potential applications of space for for sustainable development. But yes, the main point is that we do have a very important function in the UN Secretariat, trying to bring these benefits to developing countries mainly.
Yeah, great. Okay, so with the announcement of Australia's new space agency, for the young Australians in the audience and listening across Australia, what could a career in outer space affairs look like to a young Australian today?
We have a small office, but still we have all the disciplines represented. So we have space lawyers, we have people from, not joking, a lot of space lawyers. We have people from international relations, I mean career. We have clearly astrophysicists like me. We have aerospace engineers, but also we have an engineer expert in remote sensing, so Earth observation, geographers, geologists. So a lot of different let's say, educational and professional backgrounds, and this is absolutely needed for the broadness of the activities we have to follow. And then clearly we interact with all the other UN entities in UN offices and entities, so including specialized agencies of the UN, which have different mandates, but still use space in few cases as a tool for supporting the fulfillment of their mandates. I don't know, I use very often WHO, which is a good example because they deal with global health, public health, and space can be a very good tool for them too.
Yeah.
So recently we started to partner with them in order to improve the benefit, increase the efficiencies, and trying to avoid overlaps between various UN entities. So we're trying to do a lot in order really to do more with the same amount of money, which I'm sure member states appreciate a lot because, you know, it's always good.
That's fascinating. It's such a broad industry that takes in so many different people with so many different backgrounds and skills. But I'd love to know a little bit more about you. How did you get to be where you are today as director of UNOSA, and what kind of skills got you there?
Yeah, it's interesting because okay, I was always fascinated by science, so not necessarily at the beginning was space only, but it was really more science. And the reason is that when you work in science, you do your research, and you are looking for something, and then very often either you find a solution or an answer to your question, or sometimes, yes, you partially find an answer, and then you open up a very broad set of additional questions. So it's quite interesting. This is the scientific process. So I wanted something, when I had to decide what to study, I wanted something which was able to allow me to improve my knowledge every day. I didn't want to stay, I mean, in front of my desk and my computer and doing always the same stuff every day. So I wanted something that was supposed to help me in keeping my knowledge, I mean, updated, and also patient, because you need patience to work 24/7 as I do. Otherwise, you don't do it. And so I went through physics, and then I decided for astrophysics and space physics. And then I had my first problem because someone was telling me, okay, but now what you do, you're a female gender, and then you have to get married. I mean, how this is compatible with your personal life? You have to, you know, the usual story of the work-life balance. And I said, okay, I want to try, and that's what I did. So I started then to work at the Italian Space Agency, up to the point when I became the director of observation of the universe, which meant in the observation of the universe is quite interesting because it was a long title, and if you allow me, quite an interesting event which happened when I was at the JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab. It was the Cassini-Huygens mission, which just had the grand finale a couple of weeks ago. I mean, diving into Saturn, and I was at JPL in the control room the entire night. So we have been spending 2 days without sleeping, eating, doing anything. And in front, I mean, director for the observation of the universe is really long. And so we didn't have enough space. So the secretary of the JPL, she said, okay, probably I can delete observation. And then I became director of the universe, which is, I have to tell you, ever the best title you can have. So I'm still quite jealous that now I cannot use it anymore. But okay, jokes apart. Jokes apart, it was quite an interesting moment of my career, and this was 2004. But okay, after having spent several years at the Italian Space Agency, I got a position at the European Space Agency as director of human spaceflight, and I was the first female director at the European Space Agency since 1975. So also in that case was quite an achievement. And then after that I spent a couple of years in Brussels dealing a little bit more with policy. And then March 2014 I got this wonderful job, which is the position of director of the Office for Outer Space Affairs.
Wonderful, thank you. I have one last question that kind of leads on from that before we'll open up to the audience. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is, of course, gender equality, and you've mentioned a lot about being the first female in a lot of points in your career. In your opinion and your experience, how can we get more women entering STEM fields and even, you know, space-related fields too? What do you think is important or needs to change for that to increase even more?
Yeah. I personally believe that it's mostly a social issue, the sense that young girls are become convinced that they cannot make it, which is absolutely not true. STEM education is in reality the main part of a project that we are putting together, which is called Space for Women. And it's essentially dealing with STEM education, in particular for women, and in particular for women in developing countries, but the model can be applied to everyone, also to men. So it's not only for women, even if the mandate that we got from member states is STEM education, in particular for women and in particular for developing countries. Apart the fact that clearly a project like this one is really in line with at least two main SDGs, so SDG number 4, quality education, and SDG number 5, empowerment of women and gender equality, and for sure it's also a way of linking better what we do in our projects to the Sustainable Development Goals. To answer your question, I believe that this is true for all the young kids that want to have a word to say for a better world, and it's to study a lot, to be committed, and to collect all the information, all the advices, all the suggestions from everyone, because you need to have a full picture before you take the decision, and then they have to listen to themselves only. That's the only way. There is no difference between men and women, and we have to go ahead trying to really get the best talented people in order to, again, be able, I hope, to develop this world in a better way, in a more sustainable way.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, I think we might open it up to any questions from our studio audience now. We've got one up the back there, so we'll just get you mic'd up.
Hi, Simonetta. I was just wondering who your role models are and how they've influenced your career.
Yeah, now I have to tell you that I never had a role model. What I did in my let's say in building my career was to not to look at the career per se, but trying to do something that I was really, let's say, rewarding, not only for, you know, getting a position, but really the job you do. And that's the reason why I like this job so much, because after more than 30 years developing hardware, sending astronauts in orbit, and doing a lot of things without looking at the social side of space, now I am in this position where I can really use my expertise, my knowledge, my network to be helpful. If I may, when I discovered that I'm considered a role model, I mean, the first time, a few years ago, I started to say, "Are you talking to me?" Then the second phase was that I have a lot of kids, very young, let's say, girls, telling me, I want to be like you. So it's more now, they really want to become like me, and not even more a role model. I'm not even more anymore a role model only, but really a model to follow, but step by step becoming like me. Now, what I say always is that each of us has his own or her own path. But I understand that this is a responsibility I have, also to work hard in order to demonstrate to the youngest that they can make it. And that's also a social responsibility that I feel, not only because I do this job, but because it's a personal responsibility that I feel. So I like to be a role model now. This was not the case, as I said, a few years ago, but now I'll do my job.
I've got a question from our Facebook audience. Will the new Australian Space Agency be involved with the Office for Outer Space Affairs? And if so, what can we contribute?
Okay, that's an easy question. And the reason is that Australia is already a member of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space since a bit. And they are already sending people in Vienna every time we have the official meetings. So there is already an involvement of Australia in our activities. The creation of a space agency will allow also an increase in terms of probably, I hope, number of students in related fields, so STEM education again. I believe that there will be an increase in the number of startups and industries working in the field, and this will allow the Australian government and the Australian community to be even more present in our activities. So I see this as a very good development.
Yeah, great. I'm wondering if there's another question from the audience.
Before you mentioned the World Health Organization and how you guys had partnered together, I was wondering, do you have any examples of the kind of cool projects that you guys do with them? Or?
Yeah, we just had end of August a joint conference with WHO in Geneva, where we decided to start with a very solid memorandum of understanding to do capacity building, because one of the problems we see with the user communities that very often in the various countries, they don't know that they can use space-based data and infrastructure for, I don't know, for telemedicine, just as a simple example. So we decided together with WHO to start with a campaign, a regional campaign, and the plan is now under development. It's quite recent as a development. Very good, I believe, because, as I said, they coordinate global and public health, and we coordinate space. And so being together and training together, because very often, you know, we go in the same country and we do training and capacity building activities on space. I mean, how space can be helpful for A, B, C, D, and they go in the same country very often the week after or the week before with another important group of experts, teaching them and training them on how they can use a certain number of tools to improve the quality of their life. But we are very experienced in space, a little bit less in global health. It's normal. And then for them, it's the other way around. So if we put together our efforts and we start planning this kind of ad hoc training courses in the various developing countries, with this different perspective, we are sure that the improvement that we will see in a given country will be very evident and quicker. So let's see if it works. And this approach will be followed also with other UN entities in other fields. We are having contacts with FAO, for example. We're starting now with UNESCO, with UNICEF, so different topics. The idea is to have joint training activities in selected countries for the time being. Again, we cannot serve the 193 member states altogether, but the plan is this is what we are planning to do.
Was there another one from the audience? Yeah.
How significant an impact do you think artificial intelligence will have on sustainable development and space? how significant an impact do you think artificial intelligence will have on developing sustainability and using space as a knowledge center?
Um, Clearly, it's not my main field, artificial intelligence. However, what I can tell you is that we are partnering, the Office for Outer Space Affairs is partnering with OICT, which is the Office of the Secretariat dealing with information technologies. And we are trying now to establish a new center in New York, which will start with GIS, so Geographical Information System, and we will add additional features in the future. So the idea of putting together ICT and space is already part of our joint effort. We have already an agreed concept note for that, and we are going to have a presentation the 5th, if I remember well, of December in New York of this idea. So for the time being, it's not part of the game, but it will, at least of the current plans, but it will be in our plans very soon.
Okay, we'll go to Facebook again. What do you think about the mission to Mars, and how do we manage our efforts to settle on other planets?
A mission to Mars, like a mission to the moon or other celestial bodies, as we say, is probably the next logical step if we want to really do something on a global scale. Mm-hmm. Space is a sort of an extension of planet Earth, and Earth is a planet. Mars probably in the past was had conditions on the surface more, let's say, ready to support life, mm-hmm. which is not the case right now, but in the past probably this was the case. And we know that the sun, in a certain number of years, let's say, few billions,
just a few,
just 4.5, will, to be precise, will become a white dwarf, which means that first will expand, and in this expansion, the temperature in the area where the Earth is located will become too high. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that we have to explore Mars now because the Earth will become too hot in 4.5 billion years, but at the same time, I have to say that this desire of the human species to become multiplanetary is something that I do understand, because planet Earth is a sort of one small planet in our solar system, and so I do believe at the same time, apart the inspiration side, which is always good, that when you have a very challenging objective, which is exploring Mars and settling on Mars, going back and forth, having the crew surviving, etc., you have to develop very new technologies, sometimes disruptive technologies. And this very often, it's been proven several times in the past, this often then brings spin-offs on Earth. New technologies, new devices, new way of doing things, mm-hmm. Are strictly derived from space activities. Even if at the beginning you don't see the immediate link, but still there is a strong link. So exploring the solar system helps then in developing new technologies. Sometimes not even, you cannot even think about this, which kind of technology you can develop. And then, if I may, it's quite interesting what we are trying to do right now. We have a mandate from our member states to try to find a good mechanism for global cooperation, global mm-hmm. governance for all member states and all the stakeholders in space, which means in space activities, which means not only the governments, not only the space agencies, not only the scientists, but also civil society, because we really need to have everyone embarked in this big challenge for the future of humanity. The private sector, the NGOs, everyone, everywhere, as we say, to work together towards this new program for the exploration of the solar system. We do believe that is a very good platform for what we call space diplomacy. Because if you have everyone, everywhere, all the stakeholders under the same framework, working together for the same goal, this could be a good element for a good, let's say, tool for trying to keep peace on Earth also, not only in space, which is okay, peaceful uses of other space, but also on Earth.
Yeah, great. All right, this is another Facebook question, which kind of ties from that. You were just talking about, you know, the possibility of humans leaving Earth, but what about in the other direction? Does the UN have any protocol if we are contacted by aliens?
We don't have evidence of the existence of aliens. No, we don't have a protocol. We don't have a mandate for that. But I'm a scientist. Before doing anything, I want to see the evidence of that.
Great. Wonderful answer. Is there another studio question? A couple over here.
Hi, Simonetta. With the increased privatisation of space exploration, has space law had to change at all?
That's a good question because you know that the treaties and the principles have been approved and ratified 50 years ago. In fact, the 10th of October, we are going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Outer Space Treaty. And at that time, the situation was quite simple. Two main spacefaring nations, Soviet Union and United States of America, and so it was quite easy. Governments and only two. You're right, the situation has been changing a lot in the last 50 years. We have more than 70 space agencies in the world. We have more than 1,400 satellites operational, only the operational ones in orbit. We have this increase in terms of CubeSats developed by university students, really also putting some, a little bit of worries around because clearly, you know, the more we launch CubeSats, the more we will have space debris, but that's another issue that we will deal in another in another session that we're going to have here. Clearly, the private sector is becoming important and prominent. And why? It's clear that every time you develop a new technology or a new sector and you have a technology which becomes mature, I don't know, if you think about telecom satellites, we have private sector involvement in telecom satellites since now decades, because this has been the first technology. At the beginning was paid by governments, so with public money. When the technology became mature enough, then you can see how the market developed, and now most of the activities in telecom are done by private sector entities. But this is true since now several decades. And then we started with meteorological satellite. Now you have a lot of activities on the private side in meteorological satellite linked to meteorological activities. And then Earth observation. Only a few years ago it was only government. Now you have a lot of private sector entities dealing with Earth observation, even developing their own satellites and then selling the images. So technology becomes mature, development of the private sector. This is a rule not only in space, but this is just to give you some examples. Now if we look at low Earth orbit, most of the space agencies, the big space agencies, know how to go back and forth. And that's the moment in which you see, I don't know, Mr. Bigelow announcing his space hotel in orbit, or others developing private spaceships to go back and forth and to bring private astronauts. So again, the technology has been developed, and now private sector is flourishing. That's the reason why I was mentioning that we do need to have a global mechanism to coordinate all the stakeholders. And if we go back to the legal regime, we have in preparation of big event, a very big event that will take place in June 2018 in Vienna, which is called Unispace Plus 50, which will decide the future strategy of the activities, as I was mentioning before, for the next coming years for the UN in space. The fact that we we need to have really a review process to review the current situation, the legal regime, so the outer space treaties, all the other treaties, the principles, and also the guidelines that have been developed in the last decades. We do need to have a review of all of this and see what next. For sure, we have to adapt. I mean, COPUOS has to take care of it. But I believe that the process is already well established. It will take a little bit because, you know, in Vienna, all our member states take all decisions by consensus, and therefore it's a little bit longer. But when the consensus is taken, then everyone is committed to stick to the rules or the guidelines, even if they're voluntary. So I'm quite confident that in the near future we will have very interesting developments also in this field.
Great. Was there another studio question?
Following on from Josh's question, I just wanted to ask, as space and the resources that are out there are becoming more and more accessible, you know, I've heard Dr. Brad Tucker talking about potential for asteroid mining in the future and things like that. I was wondering whether you believe that UNUSA has a role to play in helping to share the benefits that come from physical, like natural resources that come from space, as well as the information and intellectual property that come from space research.
Yeah, our role in this field is quite important in the sense that we for example, one of the tools that I didn't mention but could be important now to mention is the register of the objects launched into outer space. So since the beginning, we are maintaining a register with everything launched in space. So if you want to know anything about a satellite or a probe or a module of the space station, you go on our website and you find all the information. Why this tool is so important is because it's the only treaty-based tool existing right now in the world. Is a sort of a transparency and confidence building system or tool, because everyone can have access to information for every operator, every satellite, everything which is existing in orbit, even if it's not anymore operational, etc. Now, if the idea that we have right now is to extend, to enlarge, to update, to strengthen, you can use the word that you like, to strengthen this register to other information, which can be very helpful as a tool for transparency and confidence building. If we had, for example, I don't know, in-orbit maneuvers or re-entry maneuvers or pre-launch notification in this register, you see immediately the advantage, because everyone can have information on what the others are doing, and this will preserve a peaceful use of outer space. At least it's a very good measure to do. Measure to do that. Talking about space mining or in general use of planetary resources, I believe that technology is not yet there, so we have still a few years before this will become true. But at the same time, there is, in preparation of Unispace Plus 50, also this element is taken in serious consideration, and member states are debating how to deal with this important topic, which is quite, by the way, new in the picture. So I see a lot of discussions ongoing. I see a lot of interest from member states to find solutions. As I said, it takes a little bit of time to find the best compromise among all the different, let's say, views. But I'm sure that before someone will be able to go and mine an asteroid, we will have something concrete on the table.
I think one last question from Facebook now. What do you think your role will look like in 2030 when we look at how we've done on the Sustainable Development Goals?
Recently, I got a similar question, and someone said, okay, probably if we do well our job, in 25 years, it could be that the Office for Outer Space Affairs, at least in terms of developing, or supporting developing countries in towards their own sustainable society, probably we are not needed anymore, at least for that part. So if we do well our job, it could be that in 24 years, everyone is well developed, each country is well developed, and space is really a common tool that everyone can use. Now, this is true if we look at space as it is today. But if at the same time we look at how space can develop, I do believe that the office can have probably a different role, not necessarily the one we have today, but I do believe it's really important in the future to have even a stronger Office for Outer Space Affairs to ensure that there is a global coordination and global governance of outer space activities, so to preserve the peaceful uses of outer space.
Great, okay. I want to finish on a question on behalf of young people in Australia. You probably know from QuestCon and the Australian National University right across Australia, there's a program called Young Australians Plan for a Planet, which gets high school students to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and how they might make a plan to meet them. What other ways could the young people of today, the people who have the potential to actually be the change makers of tomorrow, how could they continue their involvement or start their involvement with the future of space exploration, cooperativity, or even with the view to sustainability on Earth?
Okay, there is already an association in place. It's called Space Generation Advisory Council. In order to be member, you need to be below 35 years old. I don't believe there is a low limit, but I mean the high limit is that you cannot go beyond 35. Otherwise, you are old. No, I'm joking. And this is one way. I'm sure that there is a chapter in Australia, and also the way already. I mean, I met few of them in Adelaide at the IAC. So this is a way of entering into the loop. SGAC is also a permanent observer at the Office for Outer Space Affairs, at the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, and we work together a lot. Also because SGAC was created as one. I mean, it was one of the results of the last Unispace event in 1999. But that's not the only way. I suggest that you follow our activities. We are preparing for Unispace Plus 50, as I mentioned already 2 or 3 times. And 2 days prior, so the 18 and 19 of June, we are having some outreach sessions. And one, there are 6 of them. One is, and all 4 are based on the 4 pillars that we are using for developing the strategy, which are space economy, space society, space accessibility, and space diplomacy. And then we have other 2 additional sessions. One is space and women, and the other one is space and youth. So follow our activities on our website, and if you want a direct involvement, participating to this space and youth session before Unispace Plus 50 could be a good starting point for you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, that is about all we've got time for. I want to thank Simonetta, the United Nations, and our studio audience for their time and questions. Thank you to all of you watching online for your questions as well. It's been a real pleasure. And I think this is where we say farewell to our Facebook audience. We're going to leave our YouTube audience with a video about the Sustainable Development Goals. But yeah, that's all we've got time for. My studio audience, can we thank Simonetta for her time?
Thank you.